Woolworths and the United Workers Union are facing off before the Fair Work Commission this morning as strikes continue to impact the supermarket supply chain. This is the third week 1,500 workers in New South Wales and Victoria have been off the job, leaving some supermarket shelves empty. Professor John Buchanan from the University of Sydney Business School is with me now. Good morning, welcome to the program. Can you tell me, how did we get here?
Look, there's been major problems in the way in which Australia distributes its wealth for quite some time through the wages system. What we've seen over the last 30 years is what's known as enterprise bargaining. That has not looked after most workers. We've seen a shift in national income away from workers and to businesses. And the underlying problem in the system is that workers are not sharing in the wealth we're creating, and in a cost of living crisis, they're getting pretty impatient with the fact that they're saying we need more.
John, what was the particular catalyst that got us to this point today?
Look, I'm not an expert on this particular dispute, but as I understand it, there's a standoff over both the quantum of the wage increase that is of interest, and you've got to remember in the post-COVID environment, inflation spiked using the CPI at 7.8% in December 2022. And if you use a broader measure, the living cost index, which factors in housing costs, it spiked at 9.3%. Wages have not kept up with that. And, no matter which way you cut the data, Australian workers are at best 5 or 6% down in real earnings. And for people who haven't had a decent wage increase for a while, some workers are down 10 or 15%. So that's the first big issue. The second issue, as I understand it in this dispute, is around the use of AI and data science in the management of the workforce. And this has been a long-standing issue in the warehouse sector, where what were called engineered standards in the 1980s and 1990s meant that workers were told with a great degree of precision how much time they had allocated for particular tasks. And if they didn't get those tasks done, then they were, warned. And if those warnings continued, they were ultimately suffering some kind of sanction. So there's a problem of living standards and pay, and a problem of work intensification and safety that comes from that.
And John, what does it mean that this has reached the Fair Work Commission this morning? I understand that they are hearing right now as we speak. And how do you expect what are the mechanics behind how that'll unfold?
Sure. In our system, it is assumed that workers should reach agreement with their employers to boost pay, and they are entitled to take industrial action, strike action, any kind of action to put pressure on the employer. And it's assumed that free collective bargaining will result in optimal outcomes. And this has been a system that the employers pushed for very aggressively in the 1980s and 1990s. What we're witnessing now is that as unions have become more effective, as they've been able to take more effective industrial action, employers are getting a bit annoyed, and so they're now saying, well, we don't want enterprise bargaining anymore. We want to go back to the Industrial Relations Commission and shut the dispute down. And so there are new provisions in the Act which talk about intractable bargaining. There's always been long-standing provisions which said if the public is at risk, disputes can be shut down. And once again, I didn't say I'm an expert on this Woolies dispute, but I'd imagine it's those issues of either intractability or public safety that will be before the Commission, and that is in the Commission's power to say this dispute should end, all parties should have a ceasefire and go back to work, or the Commission might say this is a world of collective bargaining, this is what happens. So I can't predict what the outcome will be. That'll be an interesting thing to watch.
No, and I think it would be risky for anyone to predict the outcome of a commission or a tribunal such as this. But there is, as you point out, quite a broad range of options that might unfold. Because on one hand, as you've touched on, the question of pay and really equity is at play here for the unions and the employees. On the other side, Woolworths is saying that they've had something like a $50 million hit to their shelves, or to their sales rather, and we know that many shelves are empty. Really, we're watching closely to see just what the determination is. What do you think, or what would you expect to follow from this, given that these are ongoing disputes?
Look, I would imagine the Commission would try and conciliate it to get the parties in a room together and knock a few heads together and say, can we find a way through this? Clearly the parties are some way off from settlement. And that's as it should be. It's always better to try and get things done by agreement. But like I say, they're going to have to make the judgment. We are in a system which privileges enterprise bargaining. It is possible for them to say, well, sorry, Woolies, you're losing money, but that's why unions take strike action. They want to focus employers' attention on the issue. So I would expect in the first instance they will try and conciliate, try and get the parties to reach an agreement. And if that doesn't work, then they'll have to make a judgment on whether it's in the public interest to end the collective bargaining and arbitrate, or let the dispute play out. And like I say, I'll watch this with intense interest. It's a very important dispute.
Professor John Buchanan from the University of Sydney Business School, always great to hear from you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure.